On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the October 21st middleweight fight as part of UFC 294. That is Nassourdine Imavov and Ikram Aliskerov. And basically, if you haven't watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles. Then I'm going to give you my pick at the end. Some of this stuff may have relevance, it may not. That's for you to decide. But we can talk about this fight in the comments after I am done recording this. Let's do a quick tail of the tape between these two. It's the battle of two Dagestani fighters, one from France, one actually living in Russia. It is the Russian sniper here, Imavov, 12-4, Ikram, 14-1, 27 years old compared to 30, 6'3" to 6 feet tall, 75-inch reach compared to 76. So you can see there, height and reach-wise, not a huge difference there. Even age-wise, not a huge age gap or anything like that. Let's start first with Ikram. A lot of hype behind this guy. People are calling him a potentially a future champion. I've heard some of that talk. 14-1 record, understandable why people are thinking that. Like I mentioned there, he is 30 years old, 6 feet tall with a 76-inch reach. Nassourdine Imavov is coming in a little bit taller in this one, and we'll talk about him shortly. Some of the accolades that he's got: he's a four-time world champion in combat sambo. He's also got a master of sport in combat sambo as well. One interesting thing about Ikram that I think people forget: he's fought at catch weight 4 times in his career. One at 189.4, one at 174, one at 180 pounds, and one at 186.2. So a couple different weight classes for him. This will be at 185, obviously. Ikram did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros in April of 2012, made his UFC debut in May of 2023. So just made his debut earlier this year. Obviously, he was on Contender Series last year. That's what got him the call to the UFC there. So he's only got the one fight in the UFC, so not a lot of data to work with here, but we'll do our best on the program. Sort of a notable win. He doesn't really have any. Phil Hawes, obviously we know who Phil Hawes is, but Phil Hawes not a ranked opponent. And then, he fought, probably most known for fighting Khamzat Chimaev in Brave, a fight that he ended up losing in the very first round. We have to mention that just because obviously Chimaev is a notable name per se or whatever. Because he's only had one fight, Ikram has not had any, injuries and no major layoffs or anything like that. He was supposed to fight Paulo Costa. They both ended up getting rebooked. Costa gets Chimaev, and Ikram gets to fight Nassourdine Imavov. So not a ton of, UFC data to work with here. Like I mentioned, a lot of talent. You can see his overall record there. 38% of his wins are both by KO, TKO, and by submission. Only 23% of his wins are by decision. Let's look at some stats with Ikram, just because, we can kind of do this. These are going to be a little bit inflated because obviously he's only got the one fight. 6.25 strikes per minute, striking accuracy 60%, striking defense is at 40%. Takedown average is 3.47. His takedown accuracy is at 33%, and he's got a 0 takedown defense because, again, we just have the one fight there. So that's pretty much everything with Ikram in this fight. We got a new champion at middleweight now. At the time of recording this, it's Sean Strickland. So, the UFC is trying to build up new contenders in that weight class. We have had guys that have, fought for the title, just like a Marvin Vettori comes to mind, Robert Whittaker, names like that, that really are, we don't know where they are right now. And that's why the UFC is, I'm sure, looking at building up new names in the weight class. You got Chimaev moving up. Ikram is part of that breed as well. Abus Magomedov. There's a number of fighters that the UFC is trying to build as new contenders in the division. So this is a big fight for Ikram, and obviously being a Muslim fighter, him being in Abu Dhabi, that's going to be a nice bit of exposure there for him on this card. So that's everything you need to know about Ikram in this fight. Let's go talk about his opponent, Nassourdine Imavov, the Russian sniper. I mentioned it there, 12-4 record. He is 27 years old. He's 6'3" with a 75-inch reach, so he'll be 4 years younger, and he's 3 inches taller than Ikram in this fight. He also has 5 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 3 decisions in his career. He's the number 11th ranked middleweight. That's the thing I forgot to mention. Ikram not ranked. He trains at an MMA Factory, Nassourdine Imavov, that is. He did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros way back in February of 2016 and actually lost his pro debut. Go and look. There's like a whole list of really good fighters that lost their pro debut. It's actually pretty crazy if you go back and look at that. I know people have written articles about this, but that's just a little tidbit. You can add Imavov to that list. And did not make his UFC debut until October of 2020. Actually beat a UFC vet to get in the UFC, Jonathan Meunier. Jonathan Meunier actually fought Colby Covington in the UFC. I think people forget that. So beats him, fights Jordan Williams, gets the win. So there we go. kind of like his opponent. He doesn't have a ton of UFC fights. Well, he's got more than Ikram does. You know, you look at some of the names that he's fought there. Some notable wins for him. I'll put Edmen Shahbazyan on this list because Shahbazyan was 11-2 at the time, and there was talk of Shahbazyan, you know, not that long ago of him being like, you know, a contender in the division. And Imavov finished him in the second round, so that was a pretty big win. Finished Ian Heinisch, which was impressive in the sense that Ian Heinisch is tough to take out. I know Chimaev, or sorry, not Chimaev. Yeah, there's, you know, not many fighters have been able to finish Ian. I think Marcus Perez finished him, but there's like very, very few fighters that have finished Heinisch. And then, you know, Buckley's kind of notable in the sense that Buckley's like a highlight reel machine, but that was still a good win there for Imavov as well. And then the only losses he's had, he lost to Phil Haas by decision. So they do have a common opponent here. Imavov loses to Phil Haas. Ikram beats him, you know, by finish. And then he's lost to Sean Strickland in a fight that I want to remind everyone he took on short notice, and it was up a weight class. So it was supposed to be him and Kelvin Gastelum, a fight that I actually picked Imavov going into that fight. And then they give him Sean Strickland, and Strickland was actually underdog in that fight. And he ended up winning that. And, you know, again, I think it was just, it's tough trying to fight someone like that on short notice. His last fight, Imavov fought Chris Curtis at UFC 289. I thought he was looking good prior to the accidental clash of heads. Chris Curtis has some pretty bad luck these days, but yeah, Imavov I thought was looking good prior to that finish, but you can't really take too much away from that. Like his opponent, Imavov does not have any major layoffs. He's never had any major injuries, anything like that. The only close fight was the Phil Haas fight. Went back and looked at the media scorecards for that one. You can see here on MMA Decisions that Phil Haas, the majority of people did feel like he won. Two scored it a draw, and 3 scored it for Imavov. So majority did feel like he lost that one. You know, not his best showing, obviously, losing that fight. Let's look at his stats here. Imavov, that is. The stats are pretty impressive. Significant strikes landed per minute, 4.55. Striking accuracies at 53%. 58% striking defense. Takedown average 1.09. Takedown accuracy is only 31%. His takedown defense is 72%. That could be interesting. Maybe we'll see some takedowns in this fight. Don't know. But nonetheless, you know, some pretty good stats overall for Imavov. Let's have a quick look at the odds here. And like you would imagine, these odds are close. You got Ikram is a slight favorite at -120, -110 on some books. So just a slight favorite there for Ikram. And Imavov, the underdog, as you can see, some of them having them dead even as well. And if you look on Tapology, we always look at the fan vote. 64% are picking Ikram in this fight over Nassourdine Imavov. This is a tough fight. It really is. I know there's a lot of fans out there who love Ikram and they want him to be this, you know, future contender, and maybe that's the case. The problem with Ikram, unfortunately, is that there's just not a ton to work with because he's only got the one UFC fight. Now, you could look outside the UFC. He's had some decent opponents. You know, the most notable, like I mentioned, being Chimaev, and he lost that fight. But I mean, there's a variety of reasons why that could have happened. But I mean, this Neto guy he beat was 12-3. Beat a guy who was 4-0 at the time. Beat a guy who was 20-13. 11. The guy he beat in Brave, Miro, was 11-3. Nishan Burrell is a UFC vet. We shouldn't really make that too notable. And then the guy he beat on Contender Series was 15-2. So I think if you add up his opponents coming into the UFC, I think it's like 114-50 or something. If you look at add up all his opponents there. So he's fighting good opposition. It's just, is it UFC level opposition? That's the big question here. How does he look in this one? I got a pick here. I'm going to go with Ikram in this fight. I should mention, if you watched my breakdown of Ikram and Paulo Costa, a fight that never ended up happening, I did pick Ikram in that fight as well. And it was, you know, most of it had to do with Costa's decline and not fighting that well. But I think Ikram does edge this one out a little bit here in this fight. Now, the thing is, it's 3 rounds, right? And if you look at Ikram, typically, like I mentioned there earlier, majority of his wins are by stoppage. So he's used to finishing guys. Here's the problem, though. He's fighting a guy in Imavov whose last stoppage loss, I already talked about it, was in his pro debut. He's a pretty durable guy. Now, Sean Strickland is not really a knockout artist per se. I mean, Strickland's last win over Israel Adesanya was not a finish. It went the distance, but you know, he still went 5 rounds in that fight and was not getting finished there. Kind of what I'm getting at here is that Imavov, I would say, is pretty durable. You know, he fights guys. He's fought guys with knockout power. Chris Curtis has knockout power. Joaquin Buckley certainly has knockout power. Edmen Shahbazyan has knockout power. We've seen a little bit of knockout power from Ian Heinisch every now and then. I kind of what I'm getting at is I think Imavov's pretty durable overall. So again, 3-round fight. Who do you favor? I think most likely what's going to happen here is Ikram's going to win a decision. Now, I know it's boring to pick a decision here, but I think the stats back me up here. Imavov, tough to take out. Ikram used to finishing his opponents. He's fighting a guy who's tough to take out, and it's only 3 rounds. Imavov's not a pushover. I don't think he's going to get finished in the first round. Not to mention Imavov's going to have a bit of a height advantage. Can Ikram get in on the inside when he's trying to hit him? We'll see. There's a couple different ways you could kind of look at that. Again, Imavov has only... maybe the only loss that Imavov's had is by submission, right? So maybe you think, okay, Ikram could go out there and get it done by submission, but it's not like he excels in the submissions more than the knockouts. It's kind of the same there, right? 38%, like I mentioned, percentages for Ikram finishing both with the knockout and with the submission. And the other thing I wanted to mention is Imavov's a little bit higher, taller, but it's not like Ikram's going to have any huge advantages in this fight. If anything, Imavov's younger, and typically when you see younger fighters, you think, okay, maybe there's more to give here, right? So maybe Imavov will look even better. I don't know if he's in the prime of his career yet. I'll just tell people, be a little bit, if you're on the Ikram side here, like I am, I'm picking him for sure. Be a little bit weary of that if this is a slam dunk win for him, because I do have my doubts here. I think the play here, if you're going to do this one, could be the over and could be the fight goes the distance. And I know that's not popular to action fighters like this. You want to see a finish, but I think it's possible. Now, this is a 5-round fight. Maybe it's a different story, because Ikram, we know does have that finishing ability. We saw him take out Phil Hawes, but I want to remind people, look at the amount of knockout losses that Phil Hawes has had in his career. It was kind of a tailor-made matchup if you look at the fight overall. I mean, Phil Hawes has been knocked out, was knocked out the fight before, not that long ago. Well, I guess kind of long ago. It was October to May. He's knocked out by Chris Curtis, knocked out by Julian Marquez. You see a theme of Phil Hawes getting knocked out in his career. It's happened a number of times. Again, it was impressive highlight reel finish, but I want to slow the brakes down a little bit on Ikram in the sense that, he beat a guy who's been knocked out a number of times here. So again, long story short, I am going to go Ikram by decision in this fight. I will be looking for that prop, and I will also be taking the over. And like I said, I might also take the fight goes the distance and the over, just because what if this does end up pretty close? Again, I think it's a classic case here. You got people who are going to look at this fight on paper and go, oh, Imavov, he lost to Sean Strickland. That was the fight he was supposed to win. Yeah, but it was short notice, and Strickland was up a weight class, which means he didn't have to cut as much weight, which means that Strickland had some advantages going into that fight. Really didn't have anything to lose. It was Imavov who, was the headliner and was expected to beat Calvin Gastelum. So, there's that as well. I think this is going to be close. I think it will be like a 29-28 type situation. But I do think Ikram will slightly edge this one a little bit on the scorecards and get it done. But like I said, if you take the fight goes the distance, that way, if there's a weird decision here, you're not going to get screwed over either way. So I would recommend that. I actually had that in the Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso fight a few weeks ago, because I was worried about that in case it was close, and it ended up being a draw, but the bet still cashed because the fight did go the distance. So that's one kind of prop to keep in mind when you're looking at this fight. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who do you think is going to win? How do you think they're going to win? I want predictions here, people. I don't want picks. Don't say I'm picking such and such, and then it ends up happening. You're like, I told you so. And it's like, yeah, but you just guessed. We don't know. So I want to hear an actual prediction. If there's any other fights you want me to preview, let me know that are coming up. We got a bunch of fight announcements this week at the time I'm recording this. So certainly open to doing that. I think the next one I'm going to be doing is Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker. That's sort of the last big fight on the Abu Dhabi card. Of course, I previewed the main and co-main events already for that. That's pretty much all I got. I'm James Lynch. Make sure you follow me TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, @Lynch on Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys soon.